The Gospel according to the 16th chapter of Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. If at this time you would like to send your children downstairs, Heidi has prepared a lesson that they can wrap up their special summer lessons with, the last of the church history lessons she'll be doing this year before diving back into the lessons that dovetail with what we're learning upstairs. Which is just perfect today because they probably wouldn't get the next three things I'm about to say, but hopefully you will. The Count of Monte Cristo, Field of Dreams, The Shawshank Redemption. What do all those stories have in common? Nothing comes to mind?
Prison. Prison.
Well, I'd say that it has to do with a lot of them, actually. The prison, that's good. That's pretty good. Kevin Costner didn't go to prison in that, though, did he? Some of the baseball players did, though. That's pretty good. I was thinking The Long Game. They're all stories, though they're very different stories. They're all stories about the long game. When you get to the end of them, you realize the hero of our story has been holding on to a particular outcome that he's been hoping for, and he has stayed steadfast, looking to that the whole time through. The Count of Monte Cristo is a classic of Western literature. There's a promising young sailor, Edmund. He's ruined by a few unscrupulous men. He goes to prison, and so there's the prison, right? There he befriends somebody who tells him about a treasure, and his death happens to be the opportunity for him to escape as well. He goes out, he finds that treasure, transforms himself into the Count of Monte Cristo, and then he plays the long game, bringing vengeance on the people that have ruined his life up to this point, and helping out those who have helped him. Takes years, but he sticks to it, makes up personas, develops intricate plots, and in the end, everything works as he intended. Field of Dreams isn't quite as long, but it's still a long game. The hero, Kevin Costner, is playing Ray Kinsella. He hears voices about plowing his field, even though it's in the middle of the growing season, and turning that part of the field into a baseball diamond. And the famous line, of course, that everyone remembers, if you build it, they will come. And of course, there are all kinds of twists and turns and crazy things happen, but he keeps listening to the voices. He keeps trying to do whatever it is he thinks that they're telling him to do. And in the end, reconciliation for all kinds of people who love baseball, including him and his dad. They're on the Field of Dreams. Shawshank Redemption has now become one of the most watched films in all of Western culture, because multiple networks have picked it up and have played it over and over and over again. If you haven't cut the cord yet and you still flip channels, you probably see somewhere on one of those channels the Shawshank Redemption. Warner Brothers has admitted that it has now become one of their most valuable assets, even though when it came out in the mid-1990s, it bombed in the theaters. Andy Dufresne gets wrongly accused. He goes to prison. And while he's there, he hatches a 19-year-long plan, which you don't even know is happening while you're watching the film. All kinds of crazy things are happening. He's a man of hope, though. He's a man of courage. That's what you think the story is about. But in the end, you realize over the last 19 years, as he has laundered the warden's money, he has been socking it away for himself and slowly digging a tunnel through his wall. And one night he just disappears through the tunnel, breaks a pipe in the sewer system, and disappears off into the sunset and lives forevermore in Mexico. Well, I mean, it's a regular story, so he dies at some point. But you know, that's the end. That's how it ends. He plays the long game. They're all playing the long game. They know there's something good at the end. They know what they have to do to get there, so they just keep plugging away, waiting for that final moment of redemption. Now, why spend so long talking about these fictional stories? Well, there's something in that calls to all of us. Even as I tell those stories, since you're hearing it from a pulpit, you're probably thinking, oh, I see. There's a long game for us, right? But the thing that calls people in these stories isn't just something that calls Christians. Shawshank Redemption isn't popular as a Christian movie. If you actually have watched it, you're like, that's not Christian. But the long game is built into us. We're all built to rejoice in stories like this. However, every long game is risky. And when you live in this world, watching a long game story like these kind of feels like it must be fiction, right? Because things don't work out that well. The best laid plans of mice and men and all that. This isn't the kind of world where the long game works out. So how can you be sure to win at any of them? Doesn't feel like it ever works. And the Lord gets that. He gets this is how our life works. And so our text that I want to focus on today, the first lesson, the one with all the extra space around it. Our text starts with the Lord pointing to a classic long game story, but a real one. Verses 1 and 2 say, "Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness and seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were cut and to the quarry from which you were hewn." Don't think that's Jesus. You know, a lot of times we hear rock and we think Jesus. He's not pointing to Jesus. He's pointing to Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who gave you birth. When I called him, he was only one man, and I blessed him and made him many. The story of Abraham and Sarah is a long game story, isn't it? The Lord called them out of a place where their family had settled, where they had success, and off they went to a place they did not know, on a promise that Abraham and Sarah were going to have children, and they were already both old, and she was barren her whole life. That's a long game with little hope of working out. And Abraham tries all kinds of things on the way to fulfill the promise for God. I've mentioned these many times before. Abraham tries to adopt someone who's going to inherit all this stuff. Maybe he can carry on this blessing, this long game that God has. It's even longer than Abraham's life. He tries marrying one of his wife's servants to have children through her. God says, no, listen, I'm going to make the two of you parents. And finally, when they're well past the age anyone has children, this barren woman, 90 years old, has Isaac. Beautiful long game story, but actually not fiction. And from Isaac, God developed a great nation. A huge nation. One that is still well known today and in great number. When Isaiah wrote, however, when Isaiah was pointing them to the rock from which they were hewn, he was writing in a time that great nation, according to God's own word, God who gave the long game to Abraham, according to God's own word, that nation was about to be decimated. They were about to be removed from the land that Abraham had gone all those miles to occupy. And in two stages, first with the northern tribes disappearing never to return, and then with the southern tribes finally being removed, they were no longer to be the occupants of the promised land. They needed a pick-me-up, or they weren't going to make it through that dark chapter of their history, and the big redemption was coming. So verse 3 continues, "The Lord will surely comfort Zion." We're going to get to the end of this long game. "The Lord will surely comfort Zion, and will look with compassion on all her ruins. He will make her deserts like Eden, her wastelands like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and the sound of singing." Which sounds nice, but so much can go wrong with a long game, right? And this is real life. So how could they be sure to get a win? Now, in each of the classic stories that I just referenced, the hero knew exactly what to do to play the long game. Count of Monte Cristo, with all his crazy plots and personas and wealth, he knew how to use those to get what he was after. Kevin Costner just had to listen to the voice that was going on in his head. In the Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne just had to keep digging away with a spoon, well, tiny pickaxe, and dumping all the debris in the yard. That was the long game. What's ours? What are we supposed to do? More than that, what are we supposed to do to guarantee a win at the end of this long game, given how often things go wrong and how often we go wrong? Now, a lot of people would look at what Isaiah's writing here, and they say, well, the answer is right there. Keep on going. Verse 4, "Listen to me, my people. Hear my nation. Instruction will go out from me. My justice will become like a light to the nations." And that's not bad. Look to the instructions God gives you to know how to run this long game. But in case you hadn't noticed, he had pointed them to Abraham. And how good was Abraham at following instructions? Batting about 375, I'd say. It's not bad. Not bad. There's no baseball in the Bible. I got to bring that back in somehow. But, he listened sometimes. He moved to the promised land. Sometimes he did what God told him to do. Sometimes he didn't. Kind of like one of us, I suppose. Is following instructions how you win the long game? He didn't listen to God's instructions at all in terms of the child. He kept trying to figure it out for God. And Sarah, what was she supposed to do? She was barren. How do you win the game? What are we supposed to do? What's our crazy plot? What's our voice to listen to? What's our debris being carried out in the field? Well, Christianity is a funny thing that way. And sometimes we forget that. That's unfortunate. Christianity is funny because we think it's about the instructions. We think that we're supposed to be listening to God and say, okay, tell me what I need to do today, and then I know I'm going to win the long game. But God says, my righteousness draws near speedily. That's verse 5. My salvation is on the way, and my arm will bring justice to the nations. The island will look to me and wait in hope for my arm. That's not instructions. That's waiting. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, that's kind of disappointing, Pastor. I thought you were going to give us something to do. Well, I guess what I'm giving you is to wait. But what I'm telling you is this. What you have to share with the world, brothers and sisters. Though certainly it includes instructions because our God is good, He is loving, He is beautiful, He is knowledgeable, and He's wise, and He shares wonderful things with us. He gives us extraordinary advice on how to live well in this world. Though that is all true, what you have is not a game to play, but a game that is guaranteed won already. You have been given news, not instructions. Instructions are great, but news is just information. And in this case, it is, I know that it stinks. God is well aware. And I know that you struggle. And that every person you ever run into in this entire world is also involved in some kind of struggle. But you know what? My righteousness draws near speedily. His righteousness, by the way, not ours. Not, bring me that righteousness quick. No, my righteousness draws near speedily. Him declaring us not guilty is coming. My salvation is on the way. God is saying, look to that long game rock from which you were hewn. Look to that story, not the fictional stories that are cool and everything, and everyone remembers them, but the real story. The real story that says God has come and He says, I got this, guys. The win is guaranteed. That's your long game. And by the way, that doesn't mean you're just sharing an ending. The righteousness is coming. Yes, salvation is on the way. There's an ending involved there that's a wonderful ending. But check out that last verse. Lift up your eyes to the heavens. Look at the earth beneath. The heavens will vanish like smoke. The earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants die like flies. But my salvation will last forever. My righteousness will never fail. So if you're thinking to yourself, it's kind of disappointing, Pastor, that you're not giving me something to do so that I can feel like I'm accomplishing something. Look at those verses again. First he said, look to the rock from which you're hewn. You are a long game people whose ending is already determined. But then he says, now look at the ground beneath you. You know why so many long games end up disappointing here? Because this place ain't even going to be here forever. It's going to go away. As the scientists are fond of saying, one day, this is all going to disappear in the heat death of the universe. So God says it's going to be a little shorter than that. The game's not quite that long. But nonetheless, this is all going to be gone. But it's not about that ending. It's about the fact that when you know that God is coming with salvation, when you know that He is coming with forgiveness, when you know He is coming to declare those who have failed over and over again not guilty, when you know that's the ending, then everything you do, whatever it is, has meaning. You can go out there and you can mess around and, the only meaning there is this is going to disappear forever. Thank God. But it means when you love your spouse, when you hug your children, when you make a budget, when you go to work, when you do something nice for the neighbor, when you thank God for the world He has given us and the life He continues to bless, You're doing something that lasts forever. You're playing a long game that's already won. And when the Lord comes back and he declares us all not guilty for the sake of his Son, when we see the fruit of the long game of the promises Jesus fulfilled to show that we are his children no matter what, and a Father who's going to intervene to save, when that day comes, everything we have done, every piece of glory we brought to God because we rejoiced to hear his instruction and knew that we were going to be with him forever. All that will go with us. That love, that care, that diligence, that effort, it's not in vain. Since the long game is already won, it doesn't matter if you're carrying debris out into a field. It doesn't matter if you're just trying to help out your friends. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If it's all to the good, it stays. It lasts long after this world has vanished in smoke. That's a long game. A long game we are sure to win. Amen. Please stand.